Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. Before we dive into this powerful episode, please remember to subscribe to our channels and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes to continue hustling. This episode is brought to you by Excite Medical and the DRX 9000, Chiro HD, Softwave, Bridge Financial, 100% Chiropractic, Chiro Health USA, Imaging Services, Chiro Moguls, The Chiro Speaking Company, New Patients in a Box, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, Life Chiropractic College West, Pro Hockey Chiros, Pro Baseball Chiros, and the IFCO. You can benefit from our full list of sponsors by visiting our sponsor page at chirohustle.com/sponsors. Links in the description. Now, let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 620 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I'm your producer, Luke Millette, and here's your host, James Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. Glenn Duffy. And if you want to hear a story about how to bridge chiropractic from mechanistic to vitalism, stay tuned for the whole episode. Welcome back. This is another episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast. We have Glenn Duffy coming on with us today, all the way from Spain. And we're going to feature this event that we're both going to be at over in Portugal, in Lisbon, Portugal. I'm going to let him fill in the gaps a lot for that during today's interview. But this is podcast episode 620 of Chiro Hustle. And before we jump into this conversation, we're going to let you guys know the difference between mechanistic practice and vitalistic practice in chiropractic. And that's a big conversation that we're going to have. But we're also going to talk to you about a practice in Spain and Europe where he practices and what it was like to practice mechanistic for some time and getting into the vitalistic model. And we're going to talk about his book, which I think he created for a certain optic, and now it's being kind of translated over to another group that is benefiting from it also. So I don't want to share too much about it, but I'll let him talk more about this book and about us being together in Portugal here in May 24th and 25th. I have to tell you the big why. Why do we do what we do over here at Chiro Hustle? Well, first things first is freedom of speech. So we never censored anyone. We know what it's like to be censored, traffic throttled, and shadow banned, and we'd never do that to anyone. And we believe that this message of chiropractic is so important that we want this message to be disseminated freely to everyone. And whatever your belief systems are, we believe in what we produce this show upon, and that is BJ Palmer's Sacred Trust. We believe in protecting the sacred trust at all costs. And that's a big why of why this show exists. We believe in medical freedom and family health freedom also. They're not the same things, but if you want guidance on that, find a chiropractor. They're going to be able to answer those questions for you. And as we get down to the rabbit hole of philosophy with the chiropractic methods, we do believe in subluxation-centered chiropractic. Supporting that, protecting that. We believe in protecting the language of chiropractic. And two of the most important forms of the protection of keeping the language in these schools, the chiropractic colleges, which I think are losing their way. So that's why if you watch this show and you think that students need to hear this message, please share this. Share the show with the campuses, share this show with the students, share this show with the young practitioners. Because what we're going to be discussing today is going to be very important for them. So we believe in innate intelligence and universal intelligence, that when man or woman, the physical gets adjusted, it connects them to man or woman, the spiritual. And that's our introduction of episode 620. Glenn Duffy, welcome.
Thank you. Very glad to be with you.
Yeah, I opened the show like a flamethrower. I want to make sure that people get it, man. Like, it's a very serious thing to me.
I would hope that after the intro, everybody's on Google looking up all of those things and checking them out. Yeah?
Well, we definitely sparked some interest. And I'm sure because of our show that they've been searched a lot more than they ever have been. and we're sparking some new conversations around the campfires and dinner tables.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So let's lead right into this. The event in Lisbon. Share with our audience some of your resonance with it, and maybe some of the things you're looking forward to.
Well, I think you just mentioned it, that the campfires and dinner tables. I don't know if they're going to be any campfires, but that's what, for me, it's a really intimate event. The Portuguese Association are small. It's their 25th anniversary. And Theo Kuhn, I can never pronounce his name properly. Kuhnen, is that right? Is the lead in this, and he's put together an absolutely remarkable program. So you've got obviously the two of us being the keynotes, but you've also got small players such as Martin Harvey, Peter Amlinger, Liz Peacock Anderson, the Floriani, so Sam and Jen Floriani. So it's a remarkable lineup. So I personally am looking forward to having a lot of fun, to be honest with you, and also to as a community, getting together and breaking wine. It's like breaking bread and drinking wine, rather, or whichever order we want to do things in. We might be breaking wine and eating bread. I don't know. It's whichever order happens.
And the other part I wanted to kind of disclose to people is it's not just for Portuguese chiropractors.
Yeah, I think actually this Europe on the whole, a lot of the events, like if you look at Car Europe, for example, that's a pan-European event. You never go to Car Europe and don't meet a load of people from different places. I think that they've got a slight advantage, the Portuguese Association, in this respect, because it's in Lisbon, and Lisbon in May is a beautiful place to be, and it's got a beautiful beach to make epic beautifuls. If people are into surf, they can go surfing, and they've got all these beautiful little castles. And I do have to say, even though I might get hung when I go out into the streets tomorrow, they do have one of the best foods in Europe, and definitely a lot better than the Spanish food. And I think it's going to be a lovely trip for people. And also over that sort of a weekend, what you do is you get to actually hang out with, from my perspective, the greats of our profession. So, Peter for me would be one of my greatest mentors, and to spend a weekend with him for me is a very special thing.
Yeah, and to just open it up to the entire profession of chiropractors, I think, I want to ring the bell to invite students to the program and to bring a friend. Like if you're coming to this and you're making the effort to come to Lisbon, bring 5 friends. Let's build a huge community of people that are all coming together and learning from each other, that will go back and actually become crusaders for this profession of chiropractic. And hopefully we can inspire some of you by regaining the fire inside of you to go back and to tell more people about the vitalistic approach of chiropractic, and to bring this message back onto the college campuses across Europe, because I know we're doing our best to create the message, but we're living it daily. So we need everybody to step in and start sharing this too, because the message of chiropractic is bigger than us.
I don't know about you, but my big aha moment really came from a vitalistic chiropractic event, my first vitalistic chiropractic event. And I could say that my life and my family's lives and my children's lives have been absolutely, totally changed for the better because of that. So I would hope that there'll be plenty of people having aha moments on that weekend. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really stoked for it.
Now let's go back to your story. Your origin is you came from Ireland.
Yes, somebody has to. Yeah, so I grew up in Ireland, and I went to kind of quite an academic school, but it was quite a traditional setting, So chiropractic, when I left Ireland, so I actually applied for medical school, and then when I turned up for the interview, I hadn't even prepared for the interview. There was something that I specifically didn't want to do medicine for. By the time I went for that interview at the age of 18, I'd already had 7 surgeries. So I'd been a kid who'd been in and out of hospital with almost entirely sporting injuries. And there was some part of me that just knew that it wasn't right. There was something wrong with the system. So I didn't want to go into medicine. And I ended up studying, it's like a physical therapist degree in England. So I moved to England when I was quite young. But, I couldn't probably put my finger on it back then, but there were a couple of things that were strong themes. One was I wanted to help people. Another one was that I didn't want to do it in the way that I'd seen it done, especially in the medical system, which just was, in my experience, had been a failure. Unfortunately, at that point in time, I'd never even heard of chiropractic. In fact, I think I'd heard of it once, just in passing, you know. So I studied physical therapy, and then there was a guy who I was actually working as a gym instructor, and he came and he said, you know, have you heard about this thing called chiropractic? It'd be great for you. And I knew very little about it, and I got into it for, I'm not ashamed to admit, totally the wrong reasons. And I think in that respect, I've kind of got a bit of a humbling story in that I got into it because I knew that chiropractors were doctors of something to do with the spine. And I really got into it because I thought that being a doctor of something to do with the spine would be great. It was a totally ego-driven decision. I'd never been adjusted at the time. I didn't, and for a long time later, I still didn't know what actual chiropractic is, what I understand it to be now. I thought it was a treatment for back problems and back pains. And so I went to chiropractic school really with the totally, you know, goals that would make me now kind of, you know, make me swallow my wine the wrong way, you know. We went through chiropractic school. It was a very mechanistic school. So in our chiropractic school, we were taught that subluxation was an historical perspective. To put that in perspective, it's like, so I was in one of the schools in the UK. It was based on the ACC model, which is the Anglo-European College of Chiropractic model, which has only gotten a lot worse since then, but it was already pretty bad. And they weren't subluxation neutral. They were subluxation averse. There was an active effort to try to teach us that chiropractic was a pain medication profession. And so we learned a lot of rehab and so on. And so when I set up my clinic, that's what I did. And I've got to confess, and I think this is a little bit unique as somebody who's now a subluxation-based vitalistic chiropractor, I was extremely successful as a mechanistic pain-based therapist. We grew. We had a couple of different sites. I had a bunch of different therapists working for me, and we worked on people. So if you came in as a patient, we would see you, and you come in with back pain or something like that, and you get nutrition. So we were kind of in a wellness model. You get nutritional help, you get exercise, you get massage therapy, you get chiropractic. But chiropractic was kind of almost as an aside in all that process. And it took a couple of lucky turns for me to move out of that. So having already succeeded, as it were, and kind of having had a big successful practice in that respect, I had a couple of moments where one of the big things, I went to a seminar and I got adjusted by a guy in a different way that I hadn't been adjusted before. He had no interest in whether or not I had pain somewhere or what I wanted adjusting. He kind of just told me to shut up. And he gave me an adjustment which was based on what my body needed, not what I thought I wanted. And I came away as a different person. And he had mentioned a word in that seminar to me. He'd mentioned the word Chiro Europe, which is a vitalistic seminar in Europe, which we met at just last April, right? Mm-hmm. And so I turned up at this Chiro Europe seminar in Barcelona as a single, not single, I was married, but I make single as an individual person in a crowd of foreign faces. And probably unbeknownst to me at the time, I had this really strong sensation that I'd arrived home. So, and the first thing I noticed was that I'd been to lots of mechanistic conferences in the past. I'd probably been in chiropractic about 12 years at that point in time. So we're talking, I graduated in 2002. So this is a while back. And at all the mechanistic conferences, there was what I now call a grayness. There was a grayness to people's faces. There was a tiredness of talking to people about pain. There was a tiredness of struggling and trying to convince people on a daily basis that they needed to come back for this, that, or the other. There was a tiredness of arguing that somebody should do exercise. There was a tiredness and a grayness around these people who were Maybe their back pain had gotten a bit better, but they were still depressed and unhappy people. So their back pain was coming back as soon as they stopped coming in. And I walked into this conference and I was like, this is where all the good-looking people from chiropractic have been hiding. And it was very simple. I mean, when I look back at it, I thought they were just all hot. I thought they were all very good-looking. But the reality was they were just smiling. They were happy people. They were people who were enjoying their practices. They were people who were making a difference on a daily basis. Yes, they still were working hard, but they had something, and it wasn't money and it wasn't status, because I already had those things. They had something that I didn't have, and it was a deep level of satisfaction and happiness in what they were doing. And so there started my journey into vitalism. So yeah.
It opens up a lot of opportunities for me to have, follow-up discussion with you. And first things first is you mentioned this about your early education, about subluxation being a historical word. Well, it is. And it doesn't need to mean that it needs to be removed from the future of this profession. And if they put so much emphasis on the removal of certain words from the profession, that must mean that they're really darn important. Must mean that they're really, really important. And if that becomes their number one thing, is to remove the language of the historical reference points of chiropractic, that must mean that we really need to pay more attention to those words. And honestly, that's, Glenn, why when we started making strides with our show, I said, I'm going to mention this in the first 2 minutes of our show, every show, because if they don't listen to the chatter and the conversation of chiropractic, they're going to know in these first 2 minutes why chiropractic does what they do. Remove it, but it's not okay. Yeah. So just to retread the conversation to the original opening statements, what you said, it is a historical word, but to remove it is not okay.
There's an aggressive move in Europe, and I know that you're interested in the situation in Europe. There's an aggressive movement in Europe, possibly worldwide, in chiropractic, to remove subluxation and adjustment, which are literally the two things that define chiropractic as different from anything else. They want to remove it. They want to call it a joint fixation, and actually even that doesn't really matter, right? And a spinal manipulation. And I know that people use the word spinal manipulation liberally, and actually, in some ways, it's a good thing, because it can allow us to actually distinguish what an unskillful cracking of something just to give temporary pain relief and tick a box on a pain relief form. The difference between that and somebody who skillfully is trying to find and reduce subluxation, not just in that moment to make the person feel temporarily different, but to free up innate in their body, to increase the CSF flow to their brain, to change how their body is able to balance, and a whole host of other things. And to do that in a sequential way, which actually changes their lives rather than just manipulating them temporarily to reduce a bit of pain. And in terms of, how much of a legacy and a difference we make on this planet Earth, I mean, they're just not even comparable. And so we have a situation where the people who are most verbal about this, I actually don't think that they've ever had chiropractic care. I really don't. I think the academics, if you're a fantastic practitioner and you're doing really well in practice and you're making huge changes in people's lives, the probability of you ending up teaching or working in research is really slim. It's really slim. And so these are guys who've never been adjusted properly. They've never been adjusted in a frequent way. It was over a decade into my career. In fact, it was about 15 years into my career when I stopped wearing glasses. I stopped wearing glasses for 4 years. Now, I live in Spain. This is a whole other logistical challenge in Spain, is we don't have enough chiropractors here. So I don't get adjusted often enough, and I don't get adjusted up here often enough. But I had an associate who adjusted me upper cervical once or twice a week over a couple of years. I stopped wearing glasses for 4 years of my life. I've been wearing them since I was a kid. I got high quality chiropractic care regularly. I stopped wearing them. I can no longer access that level of care. I'm wearing glasses again. Like, these are these are not small things, you know, but there has to be a consistency to our plans. And if we're just talking about spinal manipulation, physiotherapists, osteopaths, anyone else can do them.
You made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is brought to you by Excite Medical and the DRX 9000, Chiro HD, Softwave, Bridge Financial, 100% Chiropractic, Chiro Health USA, Imaging Services, Chiro Moguls, The Chiro Speaking Company, New Patients in a Box, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, Life Chiropractic College West, Pro Hockey Chiros, Pro Baseball Chiros, and the IFCO. You can benefit from our full list of sponsors by visiting our sponsor page at chirohustle.com/sponsors. Links in the description. Now, let's hustle. Well, I was asked by this production company here in the US to be their subject matter expert on chiropractic. And they interviewed me yesterday so that they can create specific branded videos for chiropractors to use. And I was like, oh boy, we have ourselves a barn burner here. And I just let it rip the whole time. And I gave them the distinction between a manipulation and an adjustment. And I was like, who on this call wants to be manipulated?
Exactly. Yeah.
Not one person was excited to be manipulated.
Leave that to the politicians.
And you know, and I think when you think about the resonance of the word, there's not one person I could come into contact in this whole business plaza that I'm at and say, hey, how would you like to be manipulated today? And I said, anybody that actually does insurance-based practice in the US and they take a payment from the insurance companies, they're not getting paid for chiropractic. They're getting paid for manipulation. And I said, that's a physical therapy code. And I was like, and if they're going to go down that path and they're not practicing chiropractic, they're practicing physical therapy. And that's okay if that's how they need to put bread on the table. But I'm not a chiropractor, and that's where my line in the sand would be drawn, is I would not take a reimbursement from that organization. I would produce an adjustment, and I would adjust people because everybody needs adjusted. No one needs manipulated. So if we want to get down to the semantics of it, that's going to be a major talking point of my presentation over in Lisbon. I'm going to take these important words and I'm going to talk to us about the vital significance of having 170,000 words in our English language and what it means when we start removing them.
Very good. I'm looking forward to this.
we might as well go and burn the books.
Yeah.
You know, because that's ultimately what they're doing to our universities, is they're saying these books are okay, but you can't read these books. These books are okay, but these books don't matter.
And so, and especially when, you know, the ship is about to land, you know, we're kind of finally coming home, you know, people are kind of, there's a shift in the public, I believe, around what they're looking for. There's a sufficient degree of dissent, dissatisfaction with the medical status quo. People understand that they need to be doing things differently. It's pretty freaking common sense. And in fact, if you want to ask about my book, that's what it's about. Is that if it's not common, if chiropractic is not common sense, there is no such thing as common sense. Is that vitalistic chiropractic is common sense. And so people are getting to that point where they're saying this ridiculous system of taking pharmaceutically manufactured substances that have been made in factories and sticking them into my, into my body in the hope that they'll remove one symptom in one part of my body, even though they're going to every part of my body, and actually they're just, tapando, suppressing the symptoms. That doesn't work. So people are in the state where they're actually ready to move over to a different model. The science, Heidi Havek's work, so many different pieces of scientific literature are all heading the same way and bringing us together. The medical doctors are getting interested in the vagus nerve. They're starting to implant things in the vagus nerve. They'd missed that one for the 125 years of chiropractic. It's like, chiropractic has been going for all this time focusing on the vagus nerve, and finally they're kind of coming to that table. everybody's looking to do what we're doing, and the mechanistic, why are they so hell-bent on doing this? I think it's just got to do with personal threat. It's got to do with our ego, It's like they're threatened by the fact that the vitalistic chiropractic has a huge place, and they want to find their own place.
My speaking coach is named Roberto Monaco. And Roberto would always tell me, if we don't tell our story, someone else will make up one about us.
That's good. I like
and that. We also have to preserve our lexicon and our language. And we have to own what chiropractic, science, philosophy, and art stands upon. If not, it will be dismantled. And other medical practices will take a little bit about it and put it in theirs and start owning it. And they'll take a little bit about it and put it over here into the next discipline, and they'll start owning it. And then it will no longer be the mantelpiece of chiropractic. It will be a little bit got salvaged, and these scoundrels will come in and they'll start misplacing it in all these other disciplines. And before you know it, the identity of chiropractic has been cracked.
And so that's actually what we are at risk of happening in parts of Europe, especially in places where chiropractic has not been legislated for, such as in Spain, where physiotherapists, some physiotherapy associations have unilaterally decided that chiropractic is a weekend course that they can take that belongs to physiotherapy. And so if you're doing it and you're not a physiotherapist, because they've got full legislation and we don't yet, we will do, then you must be practicing without a license. So that's a situation that we're in parts of Europe, where physios and so on. Now, in European law, that is factually incorrect, and we can prove that and so on, but it doesn't mean that you don't get a headache in the process. And that's the situation in Spain right now, is there's a legal vacuum where chiropractic isn't legislated for, it's not protected, and people are trying to grab it. They're trying to make it a part of their profession. I believe they tried to do that in Italy as well. And I got to say, having worked in the UK and England, and knowing a lot of American chiropractors, it's really hard to identify with how practicing in that environment is. We're going to be talking in Lisbon I believe it's the only country worldwide which has the word subluxation in the chiropractic constitution. I don't know if you know that. So in Lisbon, that's the word they have. Chiropractic is the treatment of the adjustment of subluxations. So,
well, I'll tell you this. The past 2 years have been a conquest for me. Almost every state association in the United States that has subluxation centered agenda has had me as a speaker. And I think that a lot of it becomes because of the fundamentals. We have to be fundamentally sound within our program and in our method. And I think that that's what you're saying there, is if it didn't matter, they wouldn't try to bastardize it. And the reason they're trying to bastardize it is because it's more powerful than anything that they can create under the medical model. And that's another part when they were interviewing me as the expert yesterday. I said, chiropractic is chiropractic is chiropractic. Don't call it a medical system. Don't call it healthcare. It's neither. It's not wellness. It's chiropractic. And anything that's a derivative of it, it comes from chiropractic. Chiropractic is a standalone profession. It doesn't fit into the medical model. And anybody that thinks otherwise, they need to go and be whatever they want to be. But if you want to be a chiropractor, go and speak chiropractic and practice chiropractic.
This is it. And that's the sacred trust. That's the sacred trust.
So when they hired me yesterday to be their expert on subject matter expert on chiropractic, man, I just let it rip. And the girl that was interviewing me said, you almost had me cry several times, because I told her, if we don't tell people the truth about chiropractic, someone else will close them for drugs or surgery. And I was like, I guarantee you, everybody on this call today has had a family member that became an opiate addict and that lost a life or that caused the suicide or caused depression, and somebody's life force was taken from them. Because people don't have the cojones to stand up and say, this is chiropractic. It's not healthcare. It's not a medical profession. It's not chiropractic medicine. They started asking me questions about chiropractic medicine. I said, that's the most oxymoron statement that anybody could ever say to me.
Yeah. We've got a problem here in Spain. The word doctor, when it's translated into Spanish, it's just called médico. Everyone calls the chiropractors médicos. And the amount of time I've got to stop people saying, don't use the M words in my practice. Don't call me a médico, and don't use the manipulation word. The two things we don't do. Don't do medicine, we don't do manipulation. Don't use the M word. Yeah.
So if people are interested in these topics being expanded upon in Lisbon, come see Glenn and I rip it on our talks and deliver people to truth. And deliverance will set you free. And I believe that that's the most important part of us coming together as a band of brothers and having our own reciprocation to our communities, and what makes it so distinct and unique for us to be able to share these messages of truth and these messages of chiropractic. So it's Lisbon, Portugal, May 25th, 24th, 25th. You're going to be able to have the influence with so many great speakers, but it's not about us on the stage. It's about you that attend. And it's about what you take away and how you go back and you take this message that we give to you and you go back to your community and you start implementing these strategies and you reformat yourself from a mechanistic lied to chiropractor into the vitalistic chiropractor of the future. And, you know, I think Thomas Edison said it best. The Edison quote is, the doctor of the future will not interest his patients in medicine, but he will interest his patients in the care and the prevention of disease through the human structure. And I think that that's really where we're at today. We're still at the light bulb moment. We're still at the Thomas Edison moment. We're still at the BJ Palmer moment. And we might be 100 years into the advancement of that, but we're still at the fundamentals of this beautiful profession of chiropractic, and we have to protect it.
It's taken a while, but it doesn't mean, you know, it's that we can, it doesn't matter how long it takes. It's worth too much to give up on. That's what, you know, and if one life is the only thing I do is to change one life through my practice this week, then I will be grateful forever. It happens I can do that with a lot more lives than one life. But, you know, if we, by sticking by our principles, we can just change one life. Yeah.
During my talk, I use a Bob Marley quote. And I say, the bad guys never take a day off, so why should I? And yeah, I think we can hang our hats on that one, because big pharma and the medical mafia, they have all the goons out, and all they're trying to do is disrupt the health and lifestyle of healthy people. And my big anchor statement to that group yesterday that interviewed me once again is, there's no money in healthy people. There's only money in sick people. So that's why, you know, the monster continues to devour people, is because they only want sick people.
So there's a fear of marketing amongst chiropractors, and it comes from this sense of you know, wanting to be humble and wanting people to magically come to your door, but they're not going to, because they're going to walk past 5 pharmaceutical adverts beforehand and walk into the pharmacists unless we step up. And that's really the call to us, to step up. It's an obligation to step up. The most selfish thing we can do is to play small and let people suffer. That's the most selfish thing we can do. It's an for me, I feel like it's an obligation. That's why I do what I do. If it was about money, I would have gotten to banking. Or it's about telling the truth and setting people free. And that's the most beautiful thing about being an advocate for chiropractic. And I don't know if you knew this about me, Glenn, but I've scheduled almost 10,000 people into chiropractic clinics
as
That's
a
beautiful.
non-chiropractor since 2016.
One of my favorite people speaks very highly of you. That's Stu Bittman. He's my mentor, and he has some very wonderful things to say about you. I don't know that being the other side of the pond, I don't know so much about you, but he has some very he points out that sometimes it takes a non-chiropractor to speak up for chiropractic, and he mentions you. Yeah.
Well, we stand on shoulders of giants, and I implore everybody that listens to this are they going to stand on your shoulders? Will you have strong enough shoulders for the future of this profession to stand on?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to end today's conversation about chiropractic with you today, Dr. Glenn Duffy. If people want your book or connect with you, because I'm sure they're going to want you to be their keynote, how can they reach out to you to speak at their conference? And where can they go for the book?
The book is on Amazon. It's Befriend Gravity, a common sense approach to rebuilding your spine. Common sense, and it's in Spanish as well. And reaching out to me, I'm going to leave that to you because I'm one of the marketing shy in our profession. I have other people do it, but somewhere in there, you've got something called a handle, which apparently they can grab onto to connect to me.
Well, if anybody out there is watching this in the Chiro space that wants to get Dr. Glenn on their program to be a speaker, reach out to me personally. You can go to chirohustle.com, send me a direct message, and I'll make sure I get to Glenn on WhatsApp, and we move things forward for this man. Well, thank you for being episode 620 of the Chiro Hustle podcast.
Thank you. So delighted, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you and giving you a big hug and hanging out and breaking some bread and sharing some wine and doing various different things with wine and bread in Lisbon.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you too, and spending some time with you and the European chiropractic family. I close out the show by telling everybody the same thing every time, as you guys are just one story away. Keep hustling. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye for now, Doc. Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.